The envelope trembled in Marcus Reeves' hands as he stood in the empty conference room. His boss's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, decisive strokes that matched her personality. Inside was either his salvation or his ruin. "Daddy, are you okay?" 8-year-old Lily tugged at his sleeve, her backpack still on, having just been picked up from the after-school program. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, searched his face with a wisdom beyond her years. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he lied, tucking the envelope into his jacket pocket. "Just work stuff." But it wasn't just work stuff. It was everything, his career, their home, their future. All of it hanging by a thread because of a bet he'd made with Victoria Chen, the most formidable CEO in the publishing industry. A bet he'd been crazy to accept. Except he'd added one condition. One simple, impossible condition that had made Victoria's eyes flash with something between respect and fury. "If I win," he'd told her, "you have to see the world through my eyes for 1 month." Now, 3 months later, the results were in. And Marcus knew that whatever was in that envelope would change everything. "Come on, Lilybug," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's go home." As they walked toward the elevator, Marcus caught sight of Victoria watching them from her office. Their eyes locked for a moment, hers unreadable, his defiant. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus took a deep breath. He had until tomorrow morning to open the envelope. Until then, he would try to forget that his entire world might come crashing down because of 5 words he'd uttered in a moment of desperation. "I accept your bet, Victoria." Chapter 1. 6 months earlier. "Daddy, you promised we'd make pancakes this morning." Marcus Reeves squinted at his bedside clock, 5:47 a.m. He'd fallen asleep just 3 hours ago after finishing edits on the manuscript that was supposed to save his career. His daughter Lily stood beside his bed, already dressed in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her curly brown hair a wild tangle around her face. "I did promise, didn't I?" Marcus groaned, pushing himself upright. The apartment was still dark, the early February morning offering no light through the blinds. "How about we make them extra special today?" Lily's face lit up. "With chocolate chips?" "And bananas," Marcus added, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "For health." "That's not how health works," Lily giggled, already racing toward the kitchen. Marcus rubbed his face, trying to wake up. 3 hours of sleep wasn't enough, especially with the presentation he had today. But promises to Lily were sacred. They had been ever since Diane died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. In the kitchen, Lily had already dragged a chair to the counter and was attempting to reach the mixing bowl from the upper cabinet. "Whoa there, mountain climber," Marcus said, hurrying to help her. "Let's not add a trip to the emergency room to our morning agenda." As they mixed batter and Lily carefully added chocolate chips, "One for the bowl, one for me," Marcus mentally rehearsed his pitch. After 5 years as a senior editor at Pinnacle Publishing, his career had stalled. His last 3 acquisitions had underperformed, and rumor had it that Victoria Chen, the new CEO brought in to revitalize the company, was cleaning house. Victoria had been at Pinnacle for 6 months, and in that time, she'd earned the nickname, the Executioner, for her ruthless efficiency in cutting what she deemed dead weight. Marcus had managed to stay off her radar so far, but today's editorial board meeting would put him directly in her sights. "Daddy, you're spilling the milk." Marcus snapped back to reality, quickly righting the measuring cup. "Sorry, Lilybug. Daddy's a little distracted." "Is it because of your big meeting?" Lily asked, stirring the batter with intense concentration. Marcus smiled. At 8 years old, Lily absorbed everything around her. "Yeah, it's a big day." "You'll do great," she said with absolute certainty. "You always say the best stories are the ones that make people feel something real. When did you get so smart?" Marcus asked, dropping a kiss on top of her head. Mom always said I got the brains in the family, Lily replied matter-of-factly. The mention of Diane sent a familiar pang through Marcus's chest. She was right about that. They ate their pancakes while Lily chattered about her science project on butterflies. Marcus nodded and asked questions on autopilot while mentally reviewing his presentation one more time. The manuscript he was pitching today was different from anything Pinnacle typically published, a raw, unflinching memoir by a former foster child who'd overcome incredible odds. It wasn't commercial enough for Pinnacle's usual taste, but Marcus believed in it with every fiber of his being. The writing was extraordinary, the story powerful. It deserved to be published, and Marcus was willing to stake his career on it. After breakfast, the morning routine kicked into high gear, getting Lily dressed, packing her lunch, checking her homework, and making sure she had everything for her after-school program. Marcus's sister Tara would pick Lily up today since the editorial board meeting could run late. "Remember, Aunt Tara is getting you after school," Marcus reminded Lily as they rushed out the door. "I know, Daddy. You told me 3 times already." "Just making sure," Marcus said, locking their apartment. "And what's the rule about going with Aunt Tara?" Lily sighed dramatically. "Wait inside the school until I see her, then check with Mrs. Rodriguez before I leave." "That's my girl." They hurried down the 5 flights of stairs. The elevator in their building was perpetually out of order, and emerged onto the busy Brooklyn street. The February air bit at their cheeks as they power-walked the 6 blocks to Lily's school. "Have a great day, Lily Bug," Marcus said, kneeling to hug her at the school entrance. "I love you to the moon." "And back and around Jupiter twice," Lily finished, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek before racing inside to join her friends. Marcus watched her go, his heart swelling with pride and anxiety. Everything he did, every late night, every risk, every sacrifice, was for her. To give her stability. To make sure she never felt the absence of her mother more than she already did. With Lily safely at school, Marcus headed for the subway, manuscript tucked securely in his messenger bag. As the train rattled toward Manhattan, he reviewed his notes one last time, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. By the time he reached Pinnacle's gleaming Midtown offices, Marcus had his game face on. He nodded to the receptionist, grabbed a coffee from the break room, and headed to his cubicle to prepare for the 10 a.m. meeting. "Reeves. Just the man I was looking for." Marcus turned to see Jerry Hoffman, his direct supervisor and the editorial director, approaching with a worried expression. "Morning, Jerry. Everything okay?" Jerry glanced around and lowered his voice. "Victoria's in a mood. 2 of the spring releases are tracking below projections, and she's on the warpath. Just tread carefully today, okay?" Marcus's stomach tightened. "Thanks for the heads up. That manuscript you're pitching, it's not exactly commercial, is it?" Jerry asked, his forehead creased with concern. "It's not typical Pinnacle fare," Marcus admitted, "but it's extraordinary, Jerry. Trust me on this." Jerry sighed. "It's not me you need to convince. Just have a backup plan, okay?" As Jerry walked away, Marcus felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe he should pitch something safer, something more in line with Pinnacle's commercial focus. But then he thought of the manuscript, of the raw truth on those pages, and his resolve strengthened. Some stories deserve to be told, regardless of their commercial appeal. At 9:55, Marcus gathered his materials and headed to the conference room. Most of the editorial team was already there, tension evident in their stiff postures and forced small talk. Victoria Chen was notorious for starting meetings exactly on time and viewing tardiness as a personal affront. At precisely 10 a.m., Victoria swept into the room. At 42, she was striking rather than conventionally beautiful, with sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, and an air of absolute authority. Her charcoal gray suit was impeccably tailored, her black hair cut in a precise bob that emphasized the angles of her face. "Good morning," she said crisply, taking her seat at the head of the table. Let's not waste time. We have 8 pitches to get through, and I have a board meeting at noon. The first 3 editors presented their acquisitions, a thriller by a mid-list author, a cookbook by a popular food blogger, and a romance novel by a rising star in the genre. Victoria listened with laser focus, asking pointed questions about market potential, production costs, and marketing strategies. When it was Marcus's turn, he took a deep breath and passed copies of his one sheet around the table. "I'm presenting Invisible Child by Zoe Washington," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It's a memoir about growing up in the foster care system, written with extraordinary insight and raw honesty." Victoria's expression remained neutral as Marcus outlined the book's strengths, the powerful narrative, the unique voice, the unflinching examination of a broken system. He spoke with passion, believing in every word. When he finished, Victoria studied him for a long moment. "What are the comparable titles?" she asked. Marcus had anticipated this question. "It has elements of Educated, by Tara Westover, and The Glass Castle, by Jeanette Walls, but Zoe's perspective as a child in the foster system makes it unique." "And the author's platform?" This was trickier. Zoe doesn't have a large platform yet, but her story is compelling enough to stand on its own. And she's willing to do whatever it takes to promote the book. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. So no platform, no built-in audience, and a difficult subject matter that most people would rather not think about. Is that an accurate summary, Mr. Reeves? Marcus felt the room's tension ratchet up. The subject matter is challenging, yes, but that's precisely why it's important. This book has the power to change perspectives, maybe even change lives. We're not in the business of changing lives, Mr. Reeves. We're in the business of selling books. Victoria's voice was cool. And based on these projections, I don't see this title meeting our minimum sales thresholds. With respect, Ms. Chen, I believe you're underestimating its potential, Marcus countered, aware he was treading on dangerous ground. Sometimes the books that seem the least commercial on paper are the ones that resonate most deeply with readers. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that so? And how many of your recent acquisitions have resonated deeply with readers, Mr. Reeves? Because according to the sales figures I reviewed this morning, your last 3 titles have underperformed by an average of 40%. The direct attack caught Marcus off guard. He was aware of his recent track record, of course, but having it laid bare in front of the entire editorial team sent heat rising to his face. "The market has been challenging for everyone," he said, fighting to keep his voice even. "Indeed it has," Victoria agreed. "Which is why we can't afford to take risks on projects with limited commercial appeal, no matter how personally moving you find them." Marcus felt something snap inside him. 3 years of grief, of struggling to balance work and single parenthood, of watching his career stagnate while he tried to give Lily stability, it all crystallized into a moment of reckless courage. "So we should only publish safe, formulaic books that fit neatly into marketing categories?" he challenged. "That's not why I got into publishing, and I don't think it's why Pinnacle built its reputation." A hush fell over the room. No one challenged Victoria Chen, especially not in front of others. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Perhaps you'd prefer to publish this title independently, then? I'm sure there are plenty of small presses that would welcome your idealism." It was a clear threat: back down or find another job. Marcus knew he should apologize, retreat, live to fight another day. But he thought of Zoe Washington, who had trusted him with her story, and of Lily, watching him every day to learn how to move through the world. "I believe in this book," he said quietly. "I'm willing to bet my career on it." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled, a small, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A bet, Mr. Reeves? How interesting." She leaned forward slightly. "Let's make it official, then. You want to champion this manuscript?" Fine. I'll give you 6 months. If the book meets our standard sales projections for the first quarter after publication, you keep your job and get the promotion you've been angling for. If it fails, you resign. No severance, no recommendations. The room went completely still. Marcus felt as though he'd stepped off a cliff, the ground rushing up to meet him. That's not a fair bet, Jerry interjected, looking alarmed. The deck is stacked against him from the start. Victoria's gaze remained fixed on Marcus. Life isn't fair, Mr. Hoffman. Neither is publishing. But I'm willing to put resources behind this title, standard marketing budget, publicity support, the works. If Mr. Reeves truly believes in this book as much as he claims, he should be willing to stake his future on it. It was career suicide. Marcus knew it, and so did everyone else in the room. Even with support, the odds of a debut memoir by an unknown author meeting Pinnacle's aggressive sales projections were slim to none. But something in Victoria's challenge ignited a spark of defiance in Marcus. She expected him to back down, to retreat into safe mediocrity. The thought of giving her that satisfaction was suddenly intolerable. I accept your bet, Victoria, he said, using her first name deliberately. But I have one condition. Victoria's eyebrows rose fractionally. You're hardly in a position to set conditions, Mr. Reeves. Maybe not, Marcus acknowledged. But if I'm staking my career on this, I think it's only fair that you have something at stake too. A murmur ran through the room. Victoria's expression remained impassive, but Marcus could sense her curiosity. What did you have in mind? She asked. Marcus met her gaze steadily. If I win, if the book meets or exceeds projections, you have to see the world through my eyes for 1 month. Victoria's brow furrowed slightly. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning you spend 1 month living as I do. Same budget, same schedule, same responsibilities. You see what it's like to be a single parent trying to make it in this industry, trying to balance everything without a safety net. The silence in the room was absolute. Victoria stared at Marcus as if he'd lost his mind, which, he reflected, he probably had. That's absurd, she said finally. Is it? Marcus countered. You're asking me to risk everything. I'm just asking you to walk in my shoes for 30 days. Unless you're afraid of what you might learn. It was a calculated risk, appealing to Victoria's well-known competitive streak. For a moment, Marcus thought he'd miscalculated as her eyes flashed with anger. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a short, sharp sound that held little humor. You have more nerve than sense, Mr. Reeves. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded decisively. Very well. I accept your condition, outlandish as it is. If, and that's an enormous if, this book meets projections, I'll spend 30 days living your life. And if it fails, you tender your resignation immediately. She extended her hand across the table. Do we have a deal? Marcus knew he should take time to think, to consult with his sister, to consider what this meant for Lily. But in that moment, with Victoria's challenging gaze fixed on him and the weight of the manuscript in his bag, he made his choice. He reached out and shook her hand. We have a deal. As their hands clasped, Marcus felt a jolt of something, determination, fear, or perhaps a premonition that this moment would change everything. Victoria released his hand and stood. Well, this has been an unexpectedly entertaining morning. The rest of the pitches will have to wait until tomorrow. Mr. Reeves, I expect a detailed publication plan on my desk by the end of the week. With that, she gathered her materials and swept out of the room, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind her. Jerry was the first to speak. Have you lost your mind? He hissed, leaning across the table. She'll bury you. Marcus watched the door through which Victoria had disappeared, a strange calm settling over him. Maybe, he conceded. Sure. Here's how the story could unfold from where it left off. 1 month later. The weight of the month-long bet was starting to sink in for both Marcus and Victoria. With each passing day, Marcus felt the pressure mounting, not just for his career but for Lily's future. The manuscript was on the shelves, and early reviews were rolling in. Some were positive, some tepid, but it was clear that Invisible Child had struck a chord with those who had read it. But would it be enough? Marcus didn't have the luxury of time to dwell on it. He was back in his apartment that night, piecing together his next steps for the book's promotion. Lily was at the kitchen table doing her homework when Marcus heard the familiar ding of an email notification. It was from Victoria. "Marcus, I need to see you. Tomorrow. Noon. Don't be late." He stared at the message for a moment, then read it again. His pulse quickened. What did this mean? Was she about to deliver the verdict on his career, or did she have something else in mind? The next day, Marcus arrived at Pinnacle Publishing's offices, as nervous as the first time he'd ever pitched a book. When he reached Victoria's office, she was already seated at her desk, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," she said, her voice sharp. Marcus did as she instructed, his nerves making the simple action feel like a major decision. He stepped forward, but before he could say anything, Victoria held up a hand. "I've been reviewing the book's progress," she began, her voice as cold as usual. "The numbers are surprising. I'm still not convinced about its long-term potential, but something in the initial reactions is telling me you might be onto something." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "So, I've won?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria didn't immediately respond. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze piercing as if she were trying to assess him. Finally, she spoke. "You've done more than just win, Marcus. You've proven me wrong. And, as promised, I'll now live your life for the next month." Marcus stood there, frozen in place. Victoria's eyes softened for just a moment. "I know you think I'm ruthless, but I'm not completely without compassion. This will be harder than you think, and I will learn what it's really like. But don't think I'm doing this out of kindness." Marcus nodded slowly, still trying to wrap his head around what had just happened. "When do we start?" The next day, the arrangements began. Victoria showed up at Marcus's apartment dressed in a modest outfit, looking slightly uncomfortable in the simple clothes. Her first task was the school run, just like Marcus did every morning. She found herself walking the crowded streets of Brooklyn, catching sight of her reflection in a store window. She looked different. For the first time in ages, she didn't have a team of assistants or a chauffeured car to shield her. She was just another person, doing the ordinary things that Marcus did every day. Lily, of course, was fascinated to see her boss walking her to school. "You're my dad's boss, right?" Lily asked curiously. Victoria smiled, a tight, almost forced smile, but she nodded. "That's right, Lily. I guess I am." Throughout the day, Victoria struggled to manage Marcus's hectic schedule. Between editorial meetings and phone calls, there was barely any time for a break. And then, at the end of the day, she found herself doing something she had never done before, cooking dinner in Marcus's cramped kitchen, setting the table, and worrying about making sure the laundry was folded. She felt the exhaustion building in her bones, a weight she hadn't experienced in years. It was both humbling and incredibly eye-opening. As the weeks went by, Victoria started to understand the real challenges Marcus faced every single day. The juggling act between work, parenting, and the constant pressure to perform weighed heavily on her. She started to see why he had been so passionate about that book, why he had risked his career for a story that was not about quick profits but about real impact. Marcus wasn't just trying to succeed, he was fighting for something larger, his daughter's future, his own sense of purpose, and a chance to prove that people like him could make a difference in a system that didn't value them. And somewhere along the way, Victoria began to feel a strange kind of respect for Marcus, not just as a colleague but as a man. Her heart softened in ways she hadn't expected. At one point, after a particularly exhausting day, Victoria and Marcus sat down together to talk. "I didn't think I'd ever say this, but I get it now," she admitted. "This life, it's harder than I thought." "You're right. You were betting on something much bigger than just a manuscript. You were betting on giving Lily a future." Marcus, looking at her for the first time as something other than a boss, nodded slowly. "It's not about winning the bet anymore, Victoria. It's about showing up every day. For her. For everything." By the time the month came to an end, Marcus had fulfilled his part of the deal. The book had exceeded expectations. The initial sales were promising, and early reviews had generated significant buzz. But more importantly, Marcus had gained something he hadn't anticipated, a true ally in Victoria. One morning, as they sat together in the conference room, Victoria looked at Marcus with a newfound respect. "I was wrong about you, Marcus. You're not just a publisher. You're someone who fights for what matters." "I'm just a dad, trying to do right by his daughter," Marcus said quietly. The contract for Invisible Child was finalized that day, securing its place in the market. But the real victory for Marcus wasn't just the book's success. It was the realization that, sometimes, the biggest challenges are the ones that shape you into the person you're meant to be. Victoria, now a changed woman, smiled at Marcus. "You did it. You won, not just the bet, but my respect." And Marcus? He had won something even more important, his future, his daughter's future, and a new partnership that would redefine his career in ways he had never imagined. Epilogue. Months later, Marcus stood in a bookshop, watching people pick up copies of Invisible Child with admiration. He had succeeded. The book was a hit, and his career was secure. But more than that, he knew that he had won the most important thing of all, the chance to truly be present for Lily, to provide for her, and to show her that sometimes taking risks, no matter how scary, leads to the greatest rewards. Victoria had kept her word. For 1 month, she had walked in Marcus's shoes. But in the end, they both realized that the true strength came not from winning a bet, but from understanding each other's lives, and from forging a partnership that would last for years to come. This would wrap up the story with a satisfying conclusion, showing both personal growth and professional triumph for Marcus and Victoria, with the bond between them shifting in a meaningful way.